How's it going there, gamers? Since you're already here, you obviously want a little more power and knowledge to get to that next level. Well, by continuing to watch this video, Jim and I will be your patron and grant you that. Because today, it's Warlocks on WebDM. Who would you sell your soul and time to, and for what power? Just to kick off the a little bit more casual.
Jeez.
Who would you want as your patron?
Who would I want as my patron of the player's handbook options?
No, I'm just, this is just a general question.
Something easy. Maybe a power or a creature that's kind of lazy, doesn't require a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'd probably do it for something like mind reading.
I think hopefully Nikola Tesla achieves some kind of demigod status.
Okay.
And he would totally be my patron.
Right.
But eventually in the end I'd probably have to like marry a pigeon or something.
You probably would have to do something weird like marry a pigeon. Of the player's handbook options.
The player's handbook though, what's your favorite?
I'd probably go Archfey because at the very least it seems like they know how to have fun without maiming or mutilating yourself.
Well, yeah, firstborn notwithstanding.
Right, exactly. So I look at the Warlock. Warlock is my favorite class that I have never really played.
Yeah,
I love it's
that
just
long.
Other than those 4 levels with that one character. So I look at the Warlock. It's like it's different. It has a different spell structure than most of the other, or like any of the other spellcasting classes in the game. The Patron and the Pact boon and the different combinations you can get from that means that it's more options and more ways you can put together a character.
And then Invocations.
And then you come with Invocations, and I find that nearly every character class that I make up and goes into my character class list, my wish list, more often than not either has a Warlock dip or is primarily Warlock, has some kind of Warlock in it.
Right.
I really have a lot of love for this class, even though, I mean, of course I don't get to play that often, so there's a good reason why I haven't played a Warlock yet. Because I only played like 3 classes in 5th edition. But that's your fault, really. That's Pruitt's fault, honestly.
I played my first long-term campaign as a DM with Spelljammer. That went for over a year.
Yeah, you did.
I've done my duty. Finally.
And I multi-class Warlock and then dropped it. Anyway, so here's where I stand on Warlocks. I like the fact that there's a lot of options for them. I like the fact that the thematic elements to them are great. The flavor text is great. The fact that they are making pacts with these otherworldly entities, and it's different than a cleric's relationship to their deity.
Right, where that's devotion. And
it's devotion
rewarded
and faith-based, and you're rewarded for it. Whereas the pact patron, or the patron magic, and the pact that you forge with your patron is entirely contractual. Patron doesn't care at all what you think about them. It's entirely do this for me, you get this.
Right.
Wants the magic, didn't do this for me. I think that that's a strong element in the Warlock's favor. But that said, there are some real drawbacks to being a Warlock and to having playing one. And I see it largely based in how closely does your DM adhere to the suggested guidelines in the DMG about CR, number of encounters per day, and how many rests you get, particularly short rests you get per long rest.
Yeah, that's gonna be a big factor for a Warlock.
Maybe in some ways, the reason why we haven't seen as many Warlocks in our campaigns is because of how we tend to run games, which is either, if we've got sequential combat, it's usually like 3 or 4, and maybe there's a short rest in there, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe 1.
Or it's, we're having a session and there are 7 or 8 or more game days that take place in there, in which case the other full casters in the party are casting away. And therefore the Warlock just becomes kind of like, well, I could cast more spells than you maybe, but I'm, you guys are, you cast as many as you want one day and then you have a long rest and then it comes again. So I think that we don't really run campaigns that are conducive to where a Warlock would shine.
Yeah, if you have the 6 to 8 encounters with like 3, maybe 4 short rests.
Maybe something like that. Yeah,
I mean, because that's 2, 4, 6, maybe 8 spell castings a day.
Yeah.
If your hex is high enough, you only do that once.
Yeah.
Right, and the rest of those are your other spells, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
But the way we do it, you get your two slots, maybe 3.
Like a lot of things, it's campaign dependent, it's DM dependent.
Right.
And you need to know the people that you're going to be gaming with before you take one of these classes. That said, I really like the way that the Warlock approaches magic, and I like that you can pick through the invocations, sort of pick these individual powers that you can then give your Warlock. Even though there are some options that get thrown out a lot, Darkness and Devil's Sight gets thrown out a lot when you're talking about Warlocks. And let me tell you, as someone who, I've only played 4 levels of Warlock, but those 4 levels included a Darkness Devil's Sight combo, and I realized that that is way unfriendly to the rest of the party. Like, Darkness is a huge area of effect.
Yeah.
And not everyone in the party can see through that magical darkness. And so there are some things that get mentioned for Warlocks that in sort of the White Room theory crafting sense are great. Throw darkness up on yourself or on the enemy, you can see through it, but they don't necessarily play well with the party dynamics.
Yeah.
You want to watch out for them.
But it might be a good way to lock down one enemy and survive.
And survive.
If it's just mano a mano,
Yeah.
you know, they're going to get disadvantaged to hit you.
The way that you can find these little combos of things, I like, you know, that you could play a character who has all these powers based around vision and sight, if you want to with the Warlock. Or if you want to expand your options and cast more spells, there are those spell-like abilities that you can get through Warlock invocations. And so I just find it a very customizable class, and I go back to it very often and sort of like, how would I play this character, or what would I do with that? That said, in terms of the nitty-gritty of the class, with the 3 pact boons, Blade, Chain, and Tome, we have 3 very different approaches to the class, and it's interesting in that they will determine, even though most of your class abilities are coming from your patron, which boon you picked is really going to determine what kind of Warlock you are.
Exactly.
And I find, like, say, Blade, you're trading versatility for power.
Exactly.
You've got the ability to sort of summon this magical blade. You can get some invocations that boost it.
It's magic, and it just is.
Yeah, and so I like that about it. I like the fact that you can summon it. I like the fact that you can do it. I like that it's another option for a Gish-type character.
Yeah, always armed.
Always armed. But at the same time, if you're expecting the Blade Warlock to keep up with an agonizing blast, I've tricked out my Eldritch blast all the way, caster Warlock, that's not what the Blade Lock is doing.
No.
They're more versatile. It's the fact that they can mix it up in melee, that they have the option to. Whereas the other 2 Warlocks, it's harder for them to do that. So that's where I stand on Blade. In terms of the Pact of the Chain, or sorry, the Chain boon, you know, having that souped up familiar is going to be a real benefit. You're trading in sort of power for utility.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you can do with it, and the one Warlock we've seen played kind of mid-tier was Pact of the Chain, and it was basically just like, it's invisible and flying and scouting for you, and
you're connected,
and you're connected to it mentally, and it's not an action to connect to it mentally. You just have it. You're just connected to it. And so,
what's the range on that? Like a mile or something?
I believe it's planar. If you take the invocation that lets you sort of see through it, you know,
no, but I thought there was a limited range for.
There's a limited range initially, but then you can take that pact boon.
That's what I'm thinking of. Okay.
And so and the Warlock in question, we're talking about who called themselves just the Herald, and it was kind of the way the character was played is sort of like, was it who's in control of this character? Is it the patron or is it the host?
Right.
As it was. I don't know. I had a lot of fun trying to figure out how to deal with a character who has a flying, invisible scout that can go anywhere and can come back to them, and you know, and it was both a challenge and sort of an interesting dimension to it for the
make great reconnoiters.
Yeah,
but it does step on the rogue's toes a bit.
It steps on the rogue's toes a bit, and I think that, you know, that's one of the cases where, you know, if you have that option, you have a rogue in the party that you learn how to share, basically, and maybe the rogue sneaks forward and he's got the you know, the familiar there with them, sort of like providing
watching over the back. Yeah.
And then Tome, of course, provides magical utility.
Yeah.
Being able to know or potentially know any ritual in the game is a huge benefit. Another one that's slightly DM dependent, particularly if your DM is one of those where it doesn't allow for spell sharing within the party. But the potential of the fact that you could learn any of these rituals means that this particular type of warlock has a lot of versatility and a lot of interesting things they can do, plus the fact that they get those extra cantrips.
I mean, maybe you're like, hey, I really like the blade lock. Having a magic thing is great. I really kind of want a familiar. Well, go tome. Take the druid cantrip shillelagh, and take the ritual find familiar.
And there you go.
Get both of those things plus a ritual book.
And there you have it. You know, and it's one of those things where you've got a lot of different options at your disposal. In my mind, I just want to play like an archfey Tomelock who tries as closely as possible to get as much magic as they can and to be the party arcanist.
Right.
And just have as much magic as possible and play them almost like a wizard and see if that would work. And so I don't know, maybe that would be a total failure and the character wouldn't be that fun, or maybe it would be one of those where it's just a different way to play the same type of role in the party. So there's something about the Warlock that does stick out to me, and it is the fact that Eldritch Blast looms so large in the Warlock's arsenal and has such an outsized role by being such a good option because you can boost it through so many different invocations.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I get it with the limitations of spell slots. You only got a couple slots, maybe 3.
Right.
So, yeah, you're going to want something that you can just spam.
Yeah.
And you got to have that, and it's got to be cool. But at the end of the day, you're just spamming.
You're still just spamming. And I go back and forth on it. And I go, okay, well, if I'm playing a more martial character, then I'm doing the same thing there. I'm attacking, hit with my sword, hit with my axe, hit with my sword. So what is it, and I try to ask myself, what is it that I say, that's fine for a martial character. They're always going to be hitting with their weapon. Why is it that casting the same cantrip over and over doesn't do the same thing for me when it comes to magic?
Yeah.
And I think it's because coming from previous editions for me, I liked the idea that I could play a magic using character and never cast the same spell twice. And wouldn't prepare doubles of any spell. I would see it as a personal challenge, just like, can I prepare a spell list for the day that has everything I need without doubling up on anything?
Right.
And so, you know, getting into casting the same spell over and over, for whatever reason for me, just kind of go, eh. And so I look at that and I go, I don't want to reduce the usefulness of Eldritch Blast. I just wish there were more invocations that did more things with other Warlock cantrips. It would be a good way to bring Blade Locks up to par with Eldritch Blast using Warlocks. It would be a good way to highlight some of the other cantrips that Warlocks have, even though they share them with other spellcasting classes. Say like, hey, here are other invocations that boost these cantrips and make them different.
Yeah.
And then Warlock becomes the kind of
something to boost like the melee cantrip or whatever.
Something to boost for the different melee cantrips, yeah.
I mean, it would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the patrons.
Oh man,
you said at the outset that you'd love to play a Fae.
I think so. Yeah.
What do you like about the Fae and what they get?
I mean, what I like about the class abilities are that they seem to lend themselves well to being a kind of battlefield trickster, where you can kind of come in, you can sort of charm, you can teleport out of harm's way if you need to. You just have a lot of abilities, it seems like, that lets you mess with the enemy in subtle ways and also just sort of exude this sort of charming Fae power. Similarly with the Fiend, with the fact that you're a bit more resilient, being, you know, what with the temporary hit points you get on killing, or being able to use Dark One's Blessing. It seems like you have a bit more resiliency built in there.
Yeah.
Great Old One seems like it'd make a great spy or be perfect for an espionage type campaign.
Oh, totally.
And so each one of them obviously is not going to work for every type of campaign. This might be one of those things where you talk to the DM before you make a Warlock and say, hey, how do you feel about patrons? How much is my patron going to impose on me during the course of the campaign? I know that if I was playing a Warlock and my patron was silent, they never said anything, never made any demands of me, never interacted with me, then I would kind of feel like, well, I chose a Warlock because I want that interaction.
Right.
And I don't always want to be aligned with my patron. It'd be interesting at times if the patron wants me to do things that I find repugnant or despicable or just not necessarily in accordance with my goals.
Exactly. How bad do you want that power?
How bad do you want that power? And so I don't know. That's sort of the central part about the patron as a class feature that I find the most interesting, because it's like I don't care if I like them. They're there for the contractual exchange of power, and is there a way as a DM that I could take that patron and make it both an asset and an occasional burden for the player? That I could say, hey, you're a Aboleth patron, that's advanced in age and incredibly powerful, and who's gifting you all this magic. He wants you to go to the next town over and convince everyone to stop eating fish. I don't know, just something weird.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of things that I think about whenever it comes to the patrons, because you can ask for odd quests that have no particular purpose or meaning to the player, and then it's just sort of like, well, why is he doing this? Well, because someone or something asked him. It doesn't have to necessarily be sinister. It can be inconvenient. It can be embarrassing. It can be silly. It can be, sort of a faux pas in terms of the setting.
Right.
And there's just different ways that you can exploit what the patron's willing to give you versus how much power you're willing to take for yourself, that I think is really fun. And never forget that fiends can write contracts in invisible ink.
Yeah, always have See Invisible on when you're signing a contract with a fiend.
Absolutely.
It's not in the player's handbook, but the Undying. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the Undying patron is one of those where when I first read it in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why would I pick this over others? Thematically, I really like it. It's sort of like I think you described it as a Lich boot camp.
Lich boot camp or like K through 12 Lich school.
Right,
Like
primary Lich school.
Primary Lich school. It's like you're just learning the ropes.
You're just learning the ropes. In terms of its abilities, I if anything, I like where they're going. I just want more of it.
Yeah.
And want to be able to use it more often, and really feel like as I progress in this class and my character gives in to their patron and continuously says yes to them and does the tasks for them and gets more power from them, that they become more and more gaunt, more and more death-like, until they look up and they might as well be undead. They might as well have gone through the Lich transformation. So I don't know. I think that it sounds like it's a class that's based more on sort of personal survival and resiliency for the Warlock. And in that respect, maybe it's what you want. Maybe there's a campaign where those abilities fit, and being extra tough and being able to bounce back from the dead or near death is what you want.
Being able to, especially if it's a heavy undead campaign, just that first level ability where, you basically have Undead Sanctuary on all the time. All the time.
And so I can see it being really fun in something like a Curse of Strahd, where you show up in Barovia and are just like, this is right at home. In fact, if Strahd doesn't watch out, I'm going to be the new Dark Lord up in here.
Right.
But I think it also, the Warlock class has an air of sort of the sinister and the evil maybe, and I don't think it necessarily has to be. But these are clearly individuals who are willing to make bargains with powers that are very much inimical to life on the prime material plane.
Exactly. And maybe you don't know exactly what it would take for you to make a deal like that, right? Yeah. A good example, the Dresden Files.
Yes.
They come for his kid.
They come for his kid.
All right,
yeah.
Go ahead and give me that Winter's Night Mantle. I'll go ahead and take a dip in Warlock.
Really got to play the Dresden Files RPG. For as much as I love the books, and we mention them as well.
Why haven't you already bought that?
I already have. I just never read it or played it. I own the rule books.
Well, shit, man.
It's it's on like my top 20 games I own but have never played.
Top 20.
And so I think that
let's do a show on that one day.
We'll have to come in and it'll be a very long show.
Yeah.
And so, like, drawing on inspiration from Dresden and even those books where either Mab or his fairy godmother sort of call on him to perform a favor or do something for him, it's never good for him.
Oh.
It always puts him in mortal danger. It always puts him in morally compromising positions. It always is an inconvenience for him. And yet at the same time, there's this path to power. It says, hey, this could be so much easier on you if you just gave in. and do this.
Yeah.
And I've personally found that when you offer that to players, when you say, here's an obstacle you have to overcome and a path towards making that obstacle trivially easy, or at least easier, the only cost of entry is some sort of role-playing element to that. Doing something despicable, whether it's, murdering someone in the middle of the woods, or collecting artifacts for a demon, or drawing on souls for a soul-eating sword. There's a way to present that option for players and to say, you know what, I can tempt you with more power, and then you really get into why these classes are so fun to play with to begin with, because you're just doing something, you're blending the mechanics and the role playing and the narrative that you're creating at the table to create something that's really fun.
It's the terrible beauty of temptation.
Yeah, and understanding that, in terms of like fairy tale narratives, a lot of the protagonists are tempted by things that players are going to go, yeah, no way, not going to be tempted by that. And so you have to offer like real temptations to the players, and that may not, you just have to know them and figure out what they like to play and offer that to them.
And most of the time, they'll usually go for it if it's presented well enough.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, with whether it's mechanical power or just something that their character wants, they'll more often go for it. And particularly if you present it in a way that's not 100% a burden, but just is occasionally burdensome and fun. It's one of those things where if they ever make a DMG2 for 5th edition, and they've said they're not going to make anything like that, they don't like the DMG1, DMG2 that 3rd and 4th edition had. Right. But if they did, I would want it to include a section of just like, hey, these are the classes as they exist in the world. And this is what it looks like when you build a world that incorporates all these classes. The Patron, when a Warlock character is made, they have introduced another NPC into that campaign in the form of a Patron. Yeah. And it is worthwhile for the DM to sit and think, what is this Patron going to do? How are they going to interact? How much of a jerk are they going to be? How much are they going to make life miserable? Is it okay for this one character's Patron to inconvenience another character that's not a part of them? And that's a delicate balance. There are some players who will react very negatively to that and say, this is not my character, I don't want to have anything to do with this. Whereas others might really dig that and say like, yeah, that'd be really fun to get in on this character's action and sort of have that interplay. And you can say the same thing for deities and clerics, for paladin orders and the paladin, for almost any of the classes, they have that potential. But to me, the Warlock has the most potential because of the Patron.
Yeah.
Anybody remember Denver the Last Dinosaur?
Of course I remember.
I don't know.
Let's recall the theme song for a minute. Denver the Last Dinosaur, he's my friend and a whole lot more. That's Denver the Last Dinosaur showed me a world I never saw before. And tell me if that doesn't sound creepy as fuck.
Well, it doesn't sound like a safe thing.
Well, it sounds like you've just entered into a very special relationship with your favorite dinosaur.
With a dinosaur. You listen to it?
I've never heard of this, so.
Just to watch this show every Sunday morning.
A lot more of what?
A lot more of what, Denver? A lot more of what, Denver?
Okay, I'm wondering here, like, y'all are my friends, right?
What part of Denver are we talking
Yeah, what part do you get more of?
You get more of.
Denver.
It was no dinosaurs. I don't know if anybody remembers dinosaurs. Yes.
I remember Dino Riders.
Dinosaurs.
And also, of course, Dinosaurs, the show.
Yes. Not the mama. Dun, 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 dun,